It was Saturday morning, and Emma was standing in front of her new apartment with a big smile on her face. After months of looking for the right place, she had finally found her new home. The apartment wasn't very big. It had a small living room, one bedroom, a kitchen, and a tiny balcony. But Emma didn't care about the size. She was excited because this was the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She took a deep breath, picked up her keys, and opened the door. The apartment was completely empty. There was no sofa, no table, no bed, and nothing on the walls. The rooms had white walls and empty floors, but Emma could already imagine how everything would look after she decorated it. She walked into the living room and looked around. She imagined a comfortable sofa against the wall, a small coffee table in the middle of the room, and a floor lamp next to the sofa. She even imagined a few plants near the window. Before she could think about the decoration anymore, she heard a loud noise outside. The moving truck had finally arrived. Emma quickly went downstairs to meet the movers. There were boxes everywhere, and some of them were so heavy that she couldn't move them by herself. The movers started bringing everything upstairs. Emma told them which boxes should go into the living room, which ones belonged in the bedroom, and which ones should go into the kitchen. After about an hour, all of her things were inside the apartment. Emma stood in the middle of the living room and looked around. There were boxes everywhere, but she wasn't worried. She smiled and said, "Okay, Emma, let's get started." After the movers left, Emma closed the door and looked around her new apartment. For a moment, she didn't know where to start because there were boxes everywhere. She decided to begin with the most important things. So she opened the first box and found some books, a small lamp, and a few picture frames inside. She took everything out and put the books on the floor while she looked for a good place for the lamp. Then she opened another box, and this one was full of kitchen items. There were plates, glasses, cups, and bowls, so Emma carried them into the kitchen and put everything away in the cabinets. She was starting to feel a little tired, but she continued unpacking. After that, she opened a large box with her bedding inside. She took out the sheets, pillows, and blanket and carried them into the bedroom. She put the sheets on the bed, placed the pillows at the top, and covered the bed with a soft blanket. The bedroom already looked much better. Emma stood in the doorway and smiled. She still had many boxes to unpack, but at least one room was almost finished. She looked at the boxes in the living room and said, "One room down, but there is still a lot to do." Then she opened another box and continued unpacking. After unpacking some of her boxes, Emma decided that it was time to decorate the living room. She wanted this room to be warm, comfortable, and cozy because she knew she would spend a lot of time there. First, she took out the small gray sofa she had bought a few days earlier. It wasn't very expensive, but it was soft and comfortable, so she placed it against the wall near the window. Then she brought in a small coffee table and put it in front of the sofa. She stepped back and looked at the room, but something still didn't feel right. The living room looked a little empty, so Emma opened another box and took out a floor lamp. She placed it next to the sofa and turned it on to see how it looked. The soft light made the room feel much warmer. Then she found the beige rug she had bought for the living room and put it under the coffee table. Emma smiled because the room was finally starting to come together. She wanted to add a few personal touches, so she took some picture frames out of another box and hung them on the wall. One picture was from her last holiday, and another one was a picture of her family. She also put a small plant on the coffee table and added 2 cushions to the sofa. Emma looked around the room one more time. It wasn't perfect, but it felt comfortable and personal. She sat down on the sofa, looked at her new home, and smiled. "I love it," she said quietly. Emma sat on the sofa for a few minutes and enjoyed her new living room, but then she noticed something was wrong. The floor lamp next to the sofa wasn't working. She stood up and checked the plug, but everything seemed fine. She tried another socket, but the lamp still didn't turn on. Emma looked at it carefully and wondered what the problem could be. Then she noticed that there was no light bulb inside the lamp. She laughed at herself and said, "Of course, I forgot the light bulb." She grabbed her bag and decided to go to a nearby store. Before leaving the apartment, she looked around and noticed a few other things she still needed. She wanted to buy some curtains for the bedroom, a few more plants, and some small decorations for the shelves. But she didn't want to spend too much money in one day, so she decided to buy only the light bulb for now. She locked the door and walked to the store. On the way, she thought about how much work she still had to do, but she also felt happy. Her new apartment was slowly becoming her home. When Emma came back home, she was carrying a light bulb and a small bag of decorations. She put the bag on the floor, took out the light bulb, and carefully put it into the floor lamp. Then she turned on the lamp, and the room was filled with a soft, warm light. Emma smiled because the living room looked even better now. She opened the small bag and took out a few candles, a little vase, and some small decorations for the shelves. She placed the candles on one of the shelves and put the vase on the coffee table. Then she added a few fresh flowers to the vase. After that, Emma walked around the apartment to see what else she could do. The kitchen was clean and organized, and the bedroom was comfortable, but there were still a few boxes in the corner. She decided to leave them for the next day. Finally, she went out onto the tiny balcony and looked around. She had already put 2 small chairs and a little table there, so it was a perfect place to sit and have her morning coffee. Emma imagined herself sitting there every morning with a cup of coffee and a good book. She took a deep breath and smiled. The apartment was still not completely finished, but it was slowly coming together, and for the first time, Emma really felt like she was home. By the evening, Emma had unpacked almost everything. The apartment looked completely different now. The living room was cozy, the kitchen was clean, and the bedroom was almost ready. There was only one small box left in the corner of the living room. Emma picked it up and noticed a small note on the top. It said, "Open this last." She smiled because she had completely forgotten about the box. She sat down on the floor, opened it slowly, and found an old photo album inside. Emma picked up the album and started looking through the pictures. There were photos from her childhood, pictures of her family, and memories from old holidays. She smiled when she saw herself as a little girl and laughed when she found some funny pictures with her friends. For a few minutes, she completely forgot about the apartment and everything she still needed to do. She just sat there and remembered the past. Then she looked around the room and realized how much had changed that day. In the morning, the apartment had been empty, but now it was full of her things and her memories. Emma put the photo album on one of the shelves and smiled. She realized that a home wasn't about having expensive furniture or perfect decorations. It was about the little things that made you feel comfortable and happy. Her books, her pictures, her plants, and her memories were slowly turning this empty apartment into her own home. Emma looked around and quietly said, "This is home." Later that evening, Emma made herself a cup of tea and sat down on the sofa. She looked around the living room and smiled. There were still a few things she wanted to do. She needed to hang the curtains in the bedroom, put up some shelves, and unpack a few small boxes. But she wasn't worried about them anymore. She knew she could do everything slowly over the next few days. For now, she just wanted to enjoy her new home. Emma opened the balcony door, and a cool evening breeze came into the room. She took her tea outside and sat on one of the small chairs. The city was getting quieter, and the lights in the buildings were slowly turning on. Emma looked at the apartment behind her and thought about the morning. Just a few hours ago, it had been an empty apartment full of boxes. Now it felt warm, comfortable, and personal. She took a sip of her tea and smiled. It had been a long and tiring day, but it had also been one of the happiest days of her life. Emma knew that there was still a lot to do, but she wasn't in a hurry. She had a new home now, and she was ready for a new chapter in her life. She sat quietly on the balcony, listening to the sounds of the city and enjoying the moment. For the first time that day, she didn't think about boxes, furniture, or decorations. She simply looked around and thought, "I'm finally home." Now that we've finished Emma's story, let's take a closer look at some of the useful words and phrasal verbs we heard along the way. When Emma arrived at her new apartment, she was ready to move in, which means to start living in a new home. Of course, moving into a new apartment usually means having lots of boxes, so Emma had to unpack everything. When you unpack, you take your things out of boxes after moving. Emma unpacked her books, kitchen items, clothes, and bedding, and then she put away the things that had a proper place. For example, she put her plates and glasses away in the kitchen cabinets. When she started decorating, she decided to put up some picture frames and shelves on the walls. We use put up when we attach or place something somewhere, especially on a wall. Later, Emma noticed that her floor lamp didn't have a light bulb, so she went to the store to pick up one. Pick up can mean going somewhere to get or buy something, so you can say, "I need to pick up some groceries on my way home." As Emma continued decorating, her empty apartment slowly started to come together, which means that something gradually becomes complete and looks better as you add the final details. Emma's living room had a comfortable sofa, a small coffee table, a floor lamp, and a soft rug. She also added some picture frames, shelves, a vase, and a few cushions to make the room more personal. These are all common words we use when talking about home decoration. Finally, Emma's apartment became cozy, which means warm, comfortable, and pleasant. It wasn't a large or expensive apartment, but with her favorite furniture, decorations, plants, and memories, it became a place that truly felt like home. So, if you're moving into a new place, remember these useful expressions. Move in, unpack, put away, put up, pick up, and come together, along with decoration words like sofa, rug, shelf, vase, cushion, and cozy. You can use these words when talking about your own home, your room, or even your next moving day. And that was Emma's first day in her new apartment. It had been a long day, full of boxes, furniture, decorating, and little problems. But somehow, everything had worked out. In the morning, Emma had walked into an empty apartment and wondered how she would turn it into a home. By the end of the day, the rooms were filled with her favorite things, her pictures, her books, and her memories. There were still a few boxes to unpack and a few things left to do, but Emma didn't mind. She knew that a home doesn't become perfect in one day. It slowly becomes your own with every little detail, every memory, and every moment you spend there. As Emma sat on the balcony with her cup of tea, she looked around and smiled. She was tired, but she was happy. She knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter in her life. And maybe that's what moving into a new home is really about. It's not just about changing your address or buying new furniture. It's about creating a place where you can relax, make memories, and feel like yourself. Thank you for listening to Emma's story. I hope you enjoyed it and learned some useful English along the way. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to come back for another English story soon. Until then, keep listening, keep learning, and enjoy your English journey.